Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the fastest kick you've ever heard about almost connects with your face? Imagine standing there, mid-motion, when someone moves so fast that your instincts freeze for a split second. That moment happened to a young martial arts newcomer named Sammo Hung, and it shifted everything he thought he knew about fighting, films, and friendship. Today, you're about to dive into a rare glimpse behind the scenes of two legends, Sammo Hung and Bruce Lee. Not just the well-choreographed fights or the glossy posters, but the unfiltered moments of doubt, respect, and raw skill. We'll uncover how Hung's journey from childhood performer to Hong Kong action star led him into Lee's orbit, why that nearly face kick changed his outlook, and how the loss of Lee echoed through an entire generation of martial arts cinema. But first, before the kicks, before the camera lights, before the name on the marquee, we go back to where it all began for Sammo Hung. Sammo Hung's origins, the academy, and the making of a fighter. Long before the fame, before the lights and wire fu, there was just a small boy in Hong Kong who couldn't sit still. Born on January 7, 1952, Sammo Hung came from a film family that lived and breathed storytelling. His father acted, his mother dressed the stars, and his grandparents worked behind the camera. So from the moment he could walk, the world of cinema surrounded him like a second home. But childhood for Sammo wasn't glamorous. While other kids played in the streets, he was sent to the China Drama Academy, a brutal Peking opera school known for shaping legends and breaking spirits. There, under the iron discipline of Master Yu Jim Yuan, young performers trained from dawn till exhaustion, flips, punches, and stretches until every muscle burned. Sammo was part of an elite student troupe known as the Seven Little Fortunes, a group that would one day produce some of Hong Kong's biggest names, including Jackie Chan and Yuan Biao. Together, they learned acrobatics, stage combat, and acting. But more than anything, they learned how to survive. That training forged Sammo's toughness, but it also nearly destroyed him. In his teenage years, a serious leg injury during practice left him bedridden for weeks. The pain was bad, but the fear of being left behind was worse. He couldn't train, couldn't perform, and the stillness caused his weight to skyrocket. By the time he returned, he wasn't the lean prodigy he once was. He was heavier, slower, but more determined than ever. Instead of giving up, Sammo turned the setback into fuel. He adapted his fighting style, using his size to his advantage and building a persona that blended power with agility, something audiences had never seen before. The boy who once worried he'd be forgotten became the performer who stole every scene. That resilience caught the attention of Hong Kong's top studios, and soon Sammo found himself working behind the camera as a stuntman and fight coordinator, learning every angle of action filmmaking from the ground up. He wasn't just a student anymore, he was becoming a force. And that force was about to collide with another rising star. One whose speed and charisma were rewriting what martial arts on screen could be. But that meeting wouldn't start as friendship. It began with a challenge, and one lightning-fast kick that Sammo never forgot. First encounters with Bruce Lee, rivalry, respect, and a test. By the early 1970s, Hong Kong cinema was shifting. A new kind of action was exploding onto screens, sharper, faster, more real. And right at the center of that movement stood Bruce Lee, a name that already carried an almost mythic weight. Sammo Hung, meanwhile, was still hustling behind the scenes, building his craft as a stuntman and choreographer. He wasn't a superstar yet, but people in the industry knew him. The kid from the China Drama Academy who could take a fall better than anyone and make it look effortless. When Bruce Lee began working on Fist of Fury and later Enter the Dragon, their paths finally crossed. The first meeting wasn't a handshake, it was an evaluation. Lee had a reputation for perfection. He expected everyone around him to match his intensity. When Sammo stepped onto the set, he wasn't intimidated. He was curious. He'd heard the stories about Bruce's speed, his precision, the way he could strike before you even saw it coming. But in Hong Kong's martial arts circles, you didn't believe something until you tested it. There was respect, yes, but also that quiet, electric rivalry that happens only between true martial artists. Both men were trained under demanding masters, both obsessed with discipline, and both wanted to prove something, not to each other, but to themselves. When they sparred, the set went silent. Crew members paused just to watch the energy between them. Sammo had faced hundreds of fighters before, but there was something different about Bruce. Every movement was clean, calculated, and impossibly fast. Sammo later said that even before they really fought, he could feel the precision in Lee's stance, like a coiled spring ready to explode. The moment of truth came when Sammo asked the question that no one else dared. "Are you really that fast?" Bruce smiled, and in an instant, Sammo found out exactly how fast. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in martial arts history, and it left Sammo Hung speechless. The near kick anecdote, the speed that shocked Hung. The air on set was heavy with that quiet tension only martial artists recognize, respect mixed with challenge. Sammo Hung stood a few feet away from Bruce Lee, half smiling, half testing. He'd asked the question every fighter wanted to ask, but never dared. "Are you really that fast?" Bruce didn't answer with words. He shifted his weight, barely perceptible, then moved. In that instant, the world seemed to slow down for everyone except Bruce Lee. A blur of motion, a rush of air, and before Sammo could even register what happened, Lee's foot stopped less than an inch from his face. No contact, no wasted movement, just total control. Sammo froze. His reflexes, his training, his confidence, all of it was a step behind. He blinked, realizing the kick had already happened and ended before his brain could catch up. When he finally exhaled, the only words that came out were, "You're really fast." Bruce laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a knowing one, the kind that says you see it now. For Sammo, that moment wasn't about being beaten. It was about witnessing something he hadn't thought possible, the perfect balance between speed, precision, and calm. Later, in interviews, Hung would describe it with the same amazement decades later. He was very fast. You can't see it. You just feel it. That single exchange wasn't just a story, it became a symbol of Bruce Lee's mastery, proof of what years of relentless discipline could create. For Sammo, it was also a turning point. He realized that martial arts wasn't just about strength or form, it was about timing, intention, and something deeper that couldn't be measured in speed alone. The kick never landed, but the lesson did. And just days after that fateful exchange, Sammo found himself facing Bruce Lee again. Not as a challenger this time, but as a sparring partner in a scene that would soon be seen around the world. What came next would catapult both men into cinematic history. But for one of them, it would also mark the beginning of an end no one saw coming. Enter the Dragon and the sudden vacuum. Work, legacy, and loss. When Enter the Dragon began filming in 1973, the energy on set was electric. This wasn't just another Hong Kong action movie, it was the first true East meets West martial arts blockbuster, and everyone felt it. For Sammo Hung, who'd been cast in the film's opening sequence as Bruce Lee's sparring partner, it was more than a job. It was a front-row seat to watch greatness in motion. The scene was simple, a test match between two fighters, bare-chested under the glare of studio lights. But what audiences didn't see was the quiet conversation behind the choreography. Bruce gave Sammo freedom. "Move how you want," he told him, because he trusted Sammo's instincts as both a martial artist and performer. What followed was a brief but unforgettable dance of precision. Bruce's movements were crisp, controlled, surgical. Sammo's reactions grounded and fierce. The fight lasted seconds on screen, but it took hours to shoot. Every frame sharpened until it felt like two minds reading each other in real time. When Enter the Dragon finally hit theaters, it shattered every expectation. Critics called it revolutionary. Audiences were stunned by Lee's speed, charisma, and philosophy. And for Sammo, being part of that legacy felt like being woven into film history itself. Then, just weeks before the film's global release, the unthinkable happened. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee was gone, only 32 years old. The news broke like a lightning bolt across the world. The official cause was listed as cerebral edema, likely the result of an allergic reaction to medication. But the shock didn't stop the rumors. People whispered about exhaustion, overtraining, hidden health issues, even darker theories. Sammo never fed the speculation, he simply mourned. "We lost him too early," he once said quietly in an interview, the weight of decades still in his voice. For Sammo, Bruce's death wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was the loss of a North Star, a figure who had changed how the world viewed Asian actors, martial artists, and storytellers. Bruce had opened the door. Now, suddenly, that door stood empty, and no one knew how to fill the space he'd left behind. In the years that followed, Sammo poured that grief into work. He began creating his own films, his own stories, and his own style, blending fight choreography with humor, philosophy, and emotion. It wasn't imitation, it was continuation. Because while Bruce Lee was gone, the idea he stood for, that discipline and creativity could break any boundary, was still alive in the people he'd inspired. And Sammo Hung was one of them. But honoring that legacy wasn't easy. Fame fades, the industry changes, and even legends have to fight for relevance. And that's exactly what Sammo would do next, in the hardest decade of his life. Hung's career. After Lee, reinvention, setbacks, and resurgence. After Bruce Lee's death, the martial arts world fell silent. Studios rushed to recreate his magic, but no one could. Sammo Hung didn't try to imitate him. He built his own lane. In 1977, he directed The Iron-Fisted Monk, blending raw kung fu with street-level realism and humor. It worked. Audiences saw something new, a heavier fighter who moved with speed, wit, and heart. Films like The Magnificent Butcher, The Prodigal Son, and Encounters of the Spooky Kind cemented his reputation as a director who could make fights feel both thrilling and human. But by the late 80s, success started slipping. Jackie Chan's international rise stole much of the spotlight, and Sammo's own projects struggled. His company, Boho Films, lost money. A few box office flops nearly ended his run. Still, Sammo kept working, choreographing, directing, mentoring, driven by the same grit that had carried him since his opera school days. Then came his comeback. In 1998, he crossed into U.S. television with Martial Law, bringing Hong Kong-style action to primetime America. It wasn't perfect, but it reminded the world who he was, a pioneer. Later, his choreography in Ip Man, 2008, and his return to directing with The Bodyguard, 2016, proved that time hadn't slowed him down. A heart surgery in 2010 forced him to finally pause, decades of exhaustion catching up. But even that didn't stop him. He recovered, changed his habits, and went right back to work. Through every rise and fall, Sammo never forgot Bruce Lee. "Bruce didn't just teach us to fight," he said once. "He taught us how to live with purpose." And that's exactly what Sammo did, turning hardship into movement, legacy into momentum. But his story doesn't end with survival. The final chapter reveals what all those years taught him, and what Bruce Lee's legacy truly meant. Legacy and reflection, what Hung's stories teach us about Bruce Lee. Decades after that lightning-fast kick, Sammo Hung still talks about Bruce Lee the same way, with awe. Not as a myth or a movie poster, but as a man who changed how people thought about discipline, power, and possibility. For Sammo, Bruce wasn't just a superstar. He was a reminder that greatness comes from obsession. The endless repetition, the precision, the refusal to settle. That's what stuck with him. Every film Sammo made after Bruce's death carried a trace of that energy. The speed, the sharpness, the need to push limits. Yet what makes Sammo's reflection special isn't nostalgia. It's honesty. He doesn't paint Bruce as untouchable. He remembers his humor, his confidence, and the quiet intensity that could fill a room. To Sammo, Bruce wasn't trying to be famous. He was trying to be free, to fight, to move, to express himself without limits. And that's the real lesson. Bruce Lee's legacy wasn't just in his punches, it was in his philosophy. "Be water," he said. "Adapt, evolve, never get stuck." Sammo lived by that rule, flowing through injury, rejection, and change, yet always finding a new form. Even now, when fans ask Sammo about Bruce, he smiles and says, "He's still teaching us." Because in every new generation of martial artists, in every film that blends heart with movement, Bruce's presence lingers, not as a ghost, but as a guide. So maybe that near-missed kick all those years ago was more than a story. Maybe it was a transfer of energy, of spirit, of legacy. Because some hits don't land on the body, they land on the soul. What do you think Bruce Lee's greatest lesson really was? Share your thoughts below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more Untold Legends.